From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is The Tyler's Place. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us as we have just wrapped up our 4th year, beginning now our 5th year, broadcasting here from the House of the Temple. You can email me always, podcast@scottishrite.org, or look for me on SR Chirp or on the Scottish Rite app. Both of those are available in your app store right now. I hope you had a chance to check out our interview with the General Secretary from the Valley of Panama City in Florida and his exploits in dealing with Hurricane Michael and what is happening in the Panhandle area of Florida and about our brothers affected. If you have not done so, I highly recommend that when you're done listening to this one, that you go ahead and listen to that episode. And if you're so inclined and you want to pitch in and help donate to help fund cleanup, restoration, and all the things that need to go on to make them whole again down in Florida, you can go to scottishrite.org, and at the top of the page, you'll see a little sign that says Donate. Click on that and follow the links to disaster relief, and you can make your donations there, and they will get to our brothers in Panama City and around the area that have been affected by Hurricane Michael. Jumping right into things, just got word that our favorite quasi-Masonic TV show has been renewed for a 2nd season. Lodge 49 has been renewed, and we're talking again with Jim Gavin and Peter Alco, who are the creators and showrunners of the show. Guys, I'm super happy that the show has been renewed, but I do have a little bit of a bone to pick with you. Your main character, Dud, who is a member of the Ancient and Benevolent Order of the Lynx, he calls the Freemasons wannabe Rosicrucians. I mean, come on.
Oh, you got to understand the Lynx have their own. They have a chip on their shoulder. They're secondary. They're fighting for their own turf.
All right. Well, anyway, the show is fantastic. So glad you've been picked up for a 2nd season. I'm not the only fan. Lots of fans out there. In fact, you've had a couple celebrity fans. I know Patton Oswalt is one. There have been some others.
Yeah, no, Patton has been has been beating the drums for us in a way we really appreciate. Was it last week The Rock was tweeting about Lodge 49?
Well, the show itself is such a breath of fresh air and a little jolt of positivity and fun in an otherwise pretty difficult landscape. You know, we have some trying times about us here in 2018, and the show, like Masonry and some other fraternal organizations as well, it provides that place where it says, different people, different backgrounds, but we're all going to try and come together for the common good. And it's a real honest look at ourselves, a little reflection of who we are. And you guys aren't poking fun. You're having fun with the idea, but not making fun. And so for that reason, I'm a fan, and I know a lot of other brothers are fans as well.
That's great. And listen, that being said, we would like to thank you for going into your secret chamber and getting us a pickup for 2nd season.
Well, it was the least we could do.
That really means a lot to us. I think, the show has a lot of, crazier aspects, but always we want to keep a foot grounded in the reality of these places, these communities that are kind of in this, like you said, it's 2018, and it's an interesting time in America and for the lodges themselves. So anything we can do to kind of both mirror and in fun ways amplify that world is something we're excited about.
Yeah, I think even before we started, but more now, it's safe to say I think Jim and I love and respect that that kind of organization and what it does for the country, for the communities, for everybody. And I just think it's a love letter, and never, we never intended it to be parody, and I think that's our rule.
By the way, we should say for folks who are a little late to the party or who missed season 1, you can go to the AMC app or go to AMC On Demand and watch episodes of Lodge 49. And I do have one major problem at this point in time, is that when the final episode hit, and I won't give it away, but I stood up at the end of the show and went, "Are you freaking kidding me?" Because the cliffhanger, oh my gosh.
Listen, that's our version of a happy ending for a season. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
We believe it or not, we were always heading towards that "Are you kidding me?" finale, and we've been working on the 2nd season, and it's all gonna kick kick into the second season and have obviously a large effect on Dud and his vision and the way he imagines himself to his kind of path within the Order of the Lynx. As the lodge itself, continues to kind of reveal its secrets, its history, as it connects to Long Beach and aerospace, and those are tracks we're going to continue to follow, along with our just kind of, our relationships between characters.
One of our big stories, that we've set up going into season 2 is that maybe the wrong guy has been made sovereign protector of a lodge. I don't know if that's ever happened in real life.
I am going to fall back on the standard Masonic answer that if I tell you, I will have to kill you. So I will leave it at that. The show's reaction among fans. What are people on the street saying? I mean, we've heard from a couple of celebrities we mentioned earlier. What are other people saying?
Well, I mean, one thing is I think the conversation about the show is kind of just starting now. It took a little while for people to find the show, but anyone, as far as people Peter and I have talked to, anyone who finds it really seems to love something about it, like on some really deep level, whether it's the characters, just the portrayal of the world itself, the kind of the intimation of these kind of strange mysteries bubbling under the surface. But I think the main thing is that it's a fun ride, and that was kind of what we were aiming for. We deal with some difficult emotional issues, and that's really important to us. But in the end, we want to entertain you for 45 minutes and want you to feel like when you enter the lodge that you are in a place you want to be and can kind of just relax and enjoy the story. And I think people are starting to discover that.
Well, guys, I can't tell you how excited I am to know that Season 2 has been picked up and that the doors of Lodge 49 are going to stay open and that we're going to find out more about the Benevolent Order of the Lynx. And I do want to say, I said this earlier, in a time when the country is just divided more than ever before, I know that one of the cool things I get to do is I get to go to my lodge and sit down with men from all different walks of life as friends and as brothers, and we're all there for a good, positive reason to be together and to prove the outside world wrong in that, nobody can get along, because we're just there and we settle our differences and we just are friends and we have a good time. And Lodge 49 is a TV show that really shows that and demonstrates that, and I think that's just a great, beautiful thing, and it shows that these fraternal organizations have such an important value, especially in times that are as divided as these. So you've got a fan in me and a lot of other Freemasons out there.
No, thank you. That
means a lot.
That means the world to us, and we're excited to keep the lodge doors open, and we really appreciate your support and spreading the word.
Absolutely. Keep the lodge doors open at Lodge 49. That's Jim Gavin and Peter Ucko. They are the showrunners and creators and producers of Lodge 49, which you can catch on AMC. If you missed Season 1, it should be available on AMC On Demand or on the AMC apps. Just look for it where you catch any of your favorite AMC shows like The Walking Dead, Mad Men, and so forth. Great show. Highly recommend it, especially if you're a Freemason. By brothers and for brothers, this is the Tyler's Place podcast from the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards. Last month on the show, we spoke to Stan Perkins, who is the son of brother Carl Perkins, the late, great, one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, and also a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason from the Valley of Memphis. Stan, we talked a lot about your father's successes, but after Blue Suede Shoes, there was a little bit of a downturn in his career, and I'm sure that had to lead to some serious frustration on his part.
Getting back to my dad, the frustration of not being following it up, Jerry Lee comes on the scene in 57, and Sam Phillips is all about Jerry Lee Lewis, and rightfully so. I mean, Jerry Lee exploded. Jerry Lee Lewis, the killer, hits like great balls of fire and Breathless, whole lot of shaking. And I think that my dad and Johnny Cash at the time were feeling left out because of Sam's attention towards Jerry Lee. and they had an offer to go to Columbia Records, in 58. And during that same time, my dad lost his oldest brother to brain cancer. He was 28 years old, like I said, that played acoustic guitar, and it was a very, very grief-stricken time in his life. The frustration of not having the hit song, losing his brother, threw him into the bottle pretty big. And he stayed there for several years. Now, I can remember that growing up. Those were dark times. They were dark times for him, so naturally it was dark times for the people that were closest around him, and that went for his wife and his kids. Praise my mother that she was able to hold it all together while, he was basically going down the tubes of alcoholism at the time.
In the early 60s, your dad's career had a little resurgence thanks to four young men from Liverpool. How did that come about?
In 64, when he went to England the first time and he met the Beatles, they recorded 3 of his songs. He was on tour with Chuck Berry. He was so well received over in England. I think it gave him a boost as far as thinking, well, they remember me over there. I can make good money by going overseas if I can't do it here in America. And he was able to do that. And then from the royalties, from the Beatles recording 3 of his songs, that was a big deal.
The 3 songs they recorded by brother Carl Perkins were Honey Don't, Matchbox, and Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby. Stan, did your dad have anything to do with the actual recording of those tunes?
He was in the recording studio when they recorded all 3. He was at Abbey Road Studios. In fact, he was supposed to leave the next day. The tour was over with, and the promoter, Don Arden, he came to my dad and he said, you may want to stay for a few more days. He said, no, I'm ready to go home. He'd been gone for like a month. He said, no, Carl, I really think you should. And he said, well, what's it about? He said, well, it's a surprise. I can't tell you. And so, anyway, the next night, the driver pulls up to the hotel. He gets in the car and drives them out of London to a big English estate. And they threw the party, the Beatles threw the party for Chuck Berry and Carl Perkins. And Chuck Berry wouldn't go. So when my dad shows up, then all the attention was given to him. And he said they basically sat in the floor with the guitar with all 4 of them around him. They was just asking him questions about Sun Records, about this song. How did he come up with the idea of going from E to C on Honey Don't, different things like that. And so they asked him the next night, they said, we're going to Abbey Road Studios to record, and we'd love for you to come. So he came and he sat in a control room with George Martin at the controls, and Ringo came up to him and asked him. He said, "Mr. Perkins, would you mind if I record a couple of your songs?" He said, "Well, no, man, have at it." He said, "Do what?" He said, "I really want to do Matchbox." He said, "Well, you do whatever you want to do," and that's how that came about. In '64. Well, like I said, up until then, from about 58 to 64, my dad was pretty bad alcoholic. The money was gone. He couldn't make had to cancel a lot of show dates because of not being able to do them because of alcohol. Mm. But he started getting it together by 64. And lo and behold, Johnny Cash came into the picture, which John was hooked on amphetamines, very bad.
Yeah, Johnny Cash's demons are pretty well documented. A deeply religious man, especially later in life, but at that point in his life was a pretty dark time for him, as you mentioned.
I can remember seeing him come to our home in Jackson, Tennessee. My dad had a hunting accident where he shot his foot with a 12-gauge shotgun, almost blowed it off. Leaned it up against the fence and crossed the fence. It was a dumb thing to do, and then the gun slipped and went off, and it hit his heel. Well, anyway, he was recuperating from that, at our home here in Jackson. John heard about the accident, and he came to the house. W.S. Holland, who also lives here in Jackson, who started out with my dad playing drums, went on later on in 1916, started playing drums for Johnny Cash. And W.S. told him that about the accident. He said, well, I want to go see it. John did. And so John at that time was traveling in a Dodge motorhome. He didn't have no Silver Eagle bus or anything at that time. And I can remember it pulling up front, but even back then, 64, 65, you didn't see many of them around. And him getting out, he weighed about 130 pounds and walking up to the front of the house. And he and my dad talked, and my mother got John off to the side and said, John, can you not get him out of the house for a few days? He's driving me crazy. I mean, he was cooped up there in the house, still drinking some. And John talked him into, he said, we've got 2 dates, one in Atlanta and one in Chattanooga. And said, why don't you go with us? And he said, I'd like to do that. So he did, and that started a 10-year relationship between him working with and for Johnny Cash.
I wonder how many people realize listening that Carl Perkins actually was the guitar player in Johnny Cash's band when Cash recorded live at San Quentin, perhaps one of Johnny Cash's most infamous albums. Just a great record, great idea to actually play in a prison, and it was there that they recorded A Boy Named Sue.
That was nothing but a poem. John, that was a live recording at San Quentin. And John, just Shel Silverstein, had written the words. He didn't have any music. But the only reason John wanted to do it is because it said the word son of a bitch in the song. And he knew the prisoners would love it. And he turned to my dad and he said, Carl, just start playing something. And I'll just recite this kind of like a recitation type thing, and I'll just be listening. And it was recorded live, and the record was the only time it was recorded and the melody was made up at that time. And everyone in the studio, they never did anything different with it. So the guitar on that song, which is the prominent instrument, was my dad playing in the background, just going, just doing a little finger picking on the guitar. But it's like, I know you've seen the movie Walk the Line, which is a great love story between Johnny and June, but I'm going to be honest with you, Maynard, that's not the way it was. Let me tell you something. Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins helped each other to put their demons behind them. They challenged each other. And they did it from a brotherly, spiritually connection that they both had with each other. You got to realize they both started at Sun Records basically at the same time. There wasn't but 2 months difference in their ages. John had a tough life living on the west side of the Mississippi. Carl Perkins lived on the east side. The Mississippi River is the only thing that divided. And they became very close on Sun Records. And then when they got back together in the mid-'60s, John with his amphetamine problem, my dad with his alcohol problem, I think if it hadn't have been each having each other at the time, I mean, the end could have been different for both of them.
That's Stan Perkins. He's the son of brother Carl Perkins, one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, and a member of the Valley of Memphis. And Carl, of course, died a couple of years ago, but we're getting some stories from Stan that have never been heard before. So real exclusive stuff here on the Tyler's Place podcast. I'm going to take the interview in its entirety, and in a couple of days I'll post it because Stan was such a fine gentleman and spent so much time with me. I don't want you guys to miss a single second of it. This is the Tyler's Place podcast, coming to you live from the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. Brother Mark Oldknow, our educational correspondent, joins us now from the Valley of Santa Fe. He is a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason, and he's going to talk to us about a very interesting symbol, the Sphinx.
Right near the end of the 32nd degree, we proclaimed the newly made member a master of the royal secret and a priest and apostle of the holy doctrine. But there's also something else that within the modern version of the on the degree that we proclaim, or that the Master of Kadosh proclaimed. He calls the newly made Masters of the Royal Secret Magi. He says they are a magus. Over the course of looking at that word and trying to figure out exactly what Pike might have meant, you'll almost always find Pike referring to it in the context of an ancient character, a guy called Simon Magus. He was a first-century convert of Christianity. We can ask, what does the word magus mean in the context of Simon Magus? And like most ancient surnames or appellations, it was a reference to where he came from, where his family and his history came from. He was what we refer to as a Magian. This was a civilization in what is now Iran, starting at least as far back as the 5th century BC. When we look at what the Magians left behind for us, they left us one of the chief symbols of the Western tradition. They didn't create it, they didn't introduce it, but they sure amplified it. And that symbol is the Sphinx. But generally, the Sphinx, of course, was the head of a man on the body of a lion. It's a symbol of regal authority. You see it as a guardian of the threshold, as a statue. It's often set at doors and as at places of passage. Anybody who has visited our magnificent house of the temple is struck for sure as they're walking in the door by those magnificent Sphinx that guard the doors to our temple. If you've never seen it or never seen the House of the Temple, I encourage you once again, get on, do a quick Google search, go visit the site, look at the Sphinx that adorn the temple. They're wonderful, they're unique, and they're very powerful. They hint at the power that's within that building. The Sphinx tells us something about regal authority and power and a transition into a place of hidden mysteries. Pike tells us in the 19th degree that masonry itself is a Sphinx, long buried in the sand. He refers to masonry and to the Sphinx as an enigma, as a riddle. Says quite literally in the 19th degree that this enigma is the creative agent of God. It is wisdom. How does the Sphinx convey that? Well, once again, we can look at the ancient traditions, the old traditions. And anybody who is a student, anybody who has done any reading in the Western traditions has come across the great story of Oedipus Rex. The name Oedipus literally means in Greek, swollen foot. In the Sphinx, the guardian of the threshold asks him a question in order to allow him to proceed down the road to his very own future, to his destiny for good or for bad, to the choices that he's going to have to make in his very name. And in the question that the Sphinx would ask him, an emphasis that Oedipus is being sent on a journey into himself. He's literally being asked a riddle, an enigma. And the riddle that's asked by the Sphinx to Oedipus is, what in the morning walks on 4 legs, in the afternoon walks on 2, and in the evening walks on 3? Now, of course, the famous answer is man, who as a child crawls on 4 legs, as an adult in the noon sun walks on 2, and as an old man walks on 3, walking with 2 legs and a cane. There were a whole host of enigmata, of riddles that were asked by the Sphinx, but the famous one was that one about man. 4, 2, and 3. 4 feet, 2 feet, 3 feet. I submit to you that sequence of 4, 2, and 3 may tell us something very, very important about our traditions. But at the risk of going on too long in any given episode, we're going to hold that for the next meeting. So at the next time, we're going to talk a little bit about what the answer to the riddle meant, what it tells us about the Sphinx, and what it tells us about us as masters of the royal secret.
I love it. A little teaser here on the Tyler's Place podcast. And I will tease you even further. Next month on the show, we will have an expert come on and discuss those 2 sphinxes that are outside the House of the Temple and give you some more details on those. They have names. We'll tell you what they are next month. That's Brother Mark Oldknow, 33rd degree from the Orient of New Mexico. It's time to move on to Tyler's Trivia, and joining me as he does every month is Brother Arturo de Hoyos. Sort of a peculiar question last month. The question was very specifically phrased. Who were the first two recorded honorary members of the Supreme Council? First, the answer, and then why the specific language?
Okay. The first two members were really honorary members, recorded members, were Jeremy Cross and James Cushman. Jeremy Cross, of course, is famous as the author of the Hieroglyphic Monitor. He was a student of Thomas Smith Webb and printed his own version of the Monitor, which included illustrations, whereas Webb's didn't. So Cross became very famous as a degree lecturer. He became the Grand Lecturer of the United States for the York Rite Bodies. And James Cushman was actually the first Grand Orator of the Grand Lodge of Virginia. They happened to become honorary members because they obtained copies of a 33rd degree manuscript. And because they had possession of the ritual, the Supreme Council found it necessary to swear them to secrecy, so they admitted them as honorary members and took the ritual from them.
They found this stuff and said, all right, well, we got to bring them in now.
Well, absolutely. I mean, once you have the secrets, I mean, the only way to keep them quiet, since they had not been bound by obligation, is to make them honorary members. Let me add one interesting thing, is that in his later years, although he wasn't really a big fan or promoter of the Scottish Rite, Jeremy Cross actually served as the Grand Commander of one of the Cerno Supreme Councils simply because he had that patent. They saw that as useful. So there's a bit of irony, is that here's a man who had received a patent from the Southern jurisdiction, who becomes a Grand Commander of a rival Supreme Council. A little bit of conflict of interest there, of course. I wouldn't be so unkind as to say a violation of obligation, but you can read between the lines.
Gotcha. Understood. Let's move on to wow, it's October already. Let's find a question for October if we could.
My gosh. Okay. How about... we'll take a simple one. What is the meaning of the T over H sometimes found on Masonic regalia?
The T over H sometimes found on Masonic regalia. That is a great one. And if you know the answer to that, send us an email, podcast@scottishrite.org. Send us a message on SR Chirp or through the Scottish Rite app. All three of those will count. And if your answer is correct, doesn't matter when you listen, as always, Brother Art.
Well, brothers, remember that we do not select our answer until just before the podcast. So whenever you have an opportunity, go ahead and submit them.
In the meantime, that's going to wrap things up for the Tyler's Place podcast. Can't believe we are about to enter our 5th year. Thank you so much for tuning in for all those episodes. And all of them are available. If you go to iTunes, you can find them all, or Spreaker, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thanks for tuning in. And always remember, you can email us, podcast@scottishrite.org. So if you've got questions, comments, or you're interested in becoming a Freemason or a Scottish Rite Freemason, email us, podcast@scottishrite.org. I'm Maynard. I'll catch you next time right here on the Tyler's Place.